You've probably wondered why some people carry the weight of the world on their shoulders from such a young age. Picture this: a 7-year-old making dinner while their parent sleeps off another bender. A 10-year-old mediating fights between adults who should be protecting them. A child who never learned how to shine because they were too busy being the quiet, obedient one. This is how trauma rewrites childhood. This is how survival becomes your identity before you even know who you are. Psychologists call it parentification, when children are assigned the role of an adult, taking on both emotional and functional responsibilities typically expected of their parents or other adults. Research shows that this role reversal forces kids to perform functions far beyond their developmental capacity, often at the cost of their own needs and growth. You might recognize yourself in these patterns. Maybe you were the family mediator, the little adult who kept everyone's secrets, or the child who learned to read every micro-expression to predict the next angry outburst. Here's the truth: you deserved to be protected and cared for, not to be the protector and caregiver. It wasn't your job to fix broken adults. Yet, reality is much more sobering. Today, I will help you understand the psychology behind what happened to you, why your nervous system adapted the way it did, and how you can begin to heal those deep wounds. By the end, you'll see how to start reclaiming the parts of yourself you had to abandon. Stick around for the practical section, where I'll share a specific protocol for beginning to mourn what was stolen from your childhood. Now, let's explore what happens to a child's developing mind when they're forced into adult roles too early. Trauma researcher Judith Herman found that when a child experiences repeated harm in their home environment, their very sense of self begins to fracture in ways that adult trauma rarely replicates. Repeated harm in adult life wears down an already formed personality, but repeated harm in childhood shapes and distorts identity from the very beginning. Think about what this means for your developing brain. A child in a dangerous home must somehow preserve trust, safety, control, and a sense of power in circumstances that deny all four. Your young mind had to make impossible choices to survive. You learn to become exquisitely attuned to every shift in an adult's expression, tone, and posture, reacting before you could even name what you sensed. You tried to disappear, staying still, expressionless, and unobtrusive while your body remained on constant high alert. This created what researchers call frozen watchfulness, a tense, paradoxical state where you're simultaneously hiding and hypervigilant. You might remember standing in doorways, listening for footsteps, reading the air when someone walked into a room, knowing the different types of footsteps of family members and how to avoid them. Your nervous system learned that scanning for danger wasn't optional, it was survival. When avoidance failed, you learned appeasement. Arbitrary rules and unpredictable punishment convinced you that resistance was pointless and that adults possessed near limitless power. You intensified efforts to be good, hoping loyalty and obedience would keep you safe. The result was automatic compliance that masked profound terror. As Herman notes, constant danger teaches constant scanning, and children become masters at reading threats before they can consciously process them. You weren't being dramatic or oversensitive. You were developing the exact skills your environment demanded. However, this hypervigilance came at a devastating cost to your developing sense of self. Pete Walker's research reveals that one of the most damaging aspects of childhood trauma is how the punitive voices of caregivers become internalized as a toxic inner critic. This critic doesn't just offer occasional self-doubt. It becomes a constant source of self-attack that perpetuates the original abandonment. Here's what happened in your developing mind. Chronic emotional neglect conditioned you to read any low mood or struggle as proof of your defectiveness. Instead of receiving comfort during difficult moments, you learned that caregivers would respond with rejection or punishment. Over time, your developing superego hardened into what Walker calls a toxic inner critic that enforces perfectionism and catastrophic thinking. You might recognize this voice. It's the one that tells you that you're not doing enough, not good enough, not worthy of care or rest. It's the voice that turns normal human emotions into evidence of your fundamental flaws. When you feel sad, it attacks. When you feel afraid, it shames. And when you need support, it tells you that you're weak. Walker found that this inner critic feeds on fear, and its primary function is to keep you in a state of chronic hypervigilance. It convinces you that if you just try harder, be better, anticipate every problem, you can finally be safe. The truth is, it's recreating the very dynamics that hurt you in the first place. You become the parent who abandoned you. You become the voice that criticized you. You become the person who withheld love until you performed perfectly. This is what Walker means when he writes, "Self-hate is the most grievous reenactment of parental abandonment." The critic also serves another function. It helps you maintain the illusion that your caregivers weren't fundamentally flawed. If you're the problem, then they're still safe to attach to. Your child mind chose self-blame over the terrifying reality that the people you depended on couldn't be depended on. Recognizing this voice is the first step in reclaiming your inner world. But before we can heal these patterns, we must first understand what was actually lost. Herman's research emphasizes something most people don't understand about childhood trauma recovery. She writes, "The survivor must grieve not only for what was lost, but also for what was never hers to lose. The childhood that was stolen from her, the security that was never hers, the unconditional love that every child deserves, but which she never received." This grief is complicated because you are not just mourning abuse or neglect. You're mourning the absence of experiences you never had, the bedtime stories that never happened, the random hugs that never came, the proud moments that weren't celebrated. You're also grieving the parts of yourself you had to abandon to survive. Your playfulness, your spontaneity, your right to be imperfect and still be loved. These weren't luxuries, they were developmental necessities that got sacrificed on the altar of family survival. Walker's work shows that grieving helps discharge what he calls the abandonment melange, the fused distress of fear, shame, and depression that sits at the core of emotional flashbacks. When you were forced to grow up early, you never learned that feelings are temporary visitors, not permanent residents. Every emotion felt like a crisis because no one taught you how to feel and then let go. The grief process isn't just about crying, though tears are a critical step in healing abandonment wounds. It's about finally allowing yourself to feel the full weight of what happened without immediately rushing to minimize it, excuse it, or fix it. It's about letting yourself be angry that you had to be strong when you deserved to be held. Your anger isn't wrong or dangerous. Your sadness isn't weakness or self-pity. These understandings are the natural responses of a nervous system finally safe enough to feel what it couldn't feel then. Recovery means exchanging self-abandonment for self-presence, And that process begins with honoring the magnitude of what you survived and what you lost. Now that we understand the psychology behind these patterns, let's look at how you can begin to heal them in practical ways. So, how does this ancient wisdom of grief and self-compassion apply to your life today? The path forward isn't about forcing yourself to get over it or pushing through the pain. It's about learning to be present with yourself in ways no one ever was. Here's a simple but powerful practice called the self-compassion protocol. It's designed to help you interrupt the inner critic and begin the process of reclaiming your abandoned inner child. Step 1. Physical grounding and recognition. Place your hand on your heart and take 3 deep breaths. Say aloud, "I recognize that I had to grow up too fast, and that wasn't fair to the child I was." Then validate specific losses by naming them. I missed out on feeling safe because I had to manage everyone else's emotions. Or I missed out on being carefree because I had to be the family's emotional caretaker. Step 2. Feeling and expressing. Allow yourself to feel anger about what was stolen from your childhood. Let yourself cry for the child who had no choice but to be strong. Speak your truth out loud. I deserved to be protected and cared for, not to be the protector and caregiver. Don't rush this step. Your emotions have been waiting decades to be witnessed. Step 3. Inner child connection. Visualize your adult self comforting your childhood self. Promise your inner child, "I will never abandon you the way others did. I will listen to your needs, and I will protect you now." Then, take one small action today that honors your need for play, rest, or joy. Maybe it's taking a bath without feeling guilty, or buying yourself something small just because you want it. This isn't about perfection, it's about practice. Each time you choose self-compassion over self-attack, you're literally rewiring your nervous system. You're teaching your inner child that they're finally safe to feel, to need, to be imperfect, and still be worthy of love. The goal of this exercise is choice. When you recognize these patterns, you can decide whether they are serving your current situation or keeping you trapped in old wounds. Healing begins with awareness and acceptance, my friend. You weren't born broken. You weren't born to carry everyone else's pain. You adapted brilliantly to an impossible situation, and every survival strategy you developed made perfect sense for the child you were in the family you had. The person reading this right now deserves to feel safe in their own body, to have needs without shame, to rest without earning it, and to be loved not for what you do, but for who you are. You didn't have that then, but you still have the power to give it to yourself now. Your childhood may have ended too early, but your healing can begin whenever you're ready. That child is always within you, waiting to create a new future together. Thank you for joining me on this exploration into the psychology of children forced to grow up early. If this resonated, please share your reflections in the comments below and subscribe for more journeys into the depths of practical psychology, philosophy, and personal development. Until next time.